Hello, and welcome to my cellar for the 107th time, but actually it's a lot more than that, but just I've only numbered that many. Anyway, new year, not a new decade. Sorry, the historian in me says that 2020 doesn't start a new decade, 21 starts the new decade, but you can't tell people that anymore because Facebook said so. Anyway, hope you had a good holiday season period. I got a number of interesting things to talk about tonight. So for the first one of 2020, let's begin. This is an interesting one, and I'll start with it now. This stems from a question on first edition AD&D thread on Facebook. And the question was, could a wish from a deck of many things change the orb of golden death from the Temple of Elemental Evil? And I read through the replies, and there were some interesting ones there. And there were several that I obviously don't agree with. Normally, well, first off, let's start with wishes. I don't like wishes. In my original first 18-month campaign of probably playing twice a week, at least, I think there were a total of 3 wishes, and I hated all of them, and they only came in because I was relying on charts to tell me how to design my dungeon. Wishes are so powerful they can actually alter time or history or past events or whatever, and they are the ultimate benison from some deity. The orb was created by evil dudes. Let's see if I can remember. I don't remember their names, but this orb can summon and control 4 kinds of demons, summon and control 4 kinds of elementals, several offensive spells, safe travel to the elemental planes, control the teleportation to the elemental nodes in the temple, and was made by, I'm not sure how this gets pronounced, Ayuz and Zugdemoy. Okay, it's my impression or my interpretation that the orb is an artifact. Artifacts were made by gods or demigods. Demons are, both sides of the scale, but much, much higher or lower entities. Wish is mortal magic. I don't believe that mortal magic can transmute a divinely manufactured or divinely composed artifact. I don't think that'll work. But that's why. Because where the intrinsic powers come from. I don't believe that you would find a wish being a benison from some deity that would be willing to upset that understood, maintained intrinsic balance of good and evil. So I don't think I'd let it happen. But that's my opinion, and that's why. Now, if you think of wish as the ultimate mortal magic, conjuration, etc., then absolutely not. No, it can't do it because mortal magic can't overcome divine magic. My opinion, that's the way I'd call it. I said I'd address it tonight, so I have. Some art that TSR used features mushrooms. Why does fungus have such a strong foundation in fantasy and fairy tales? Because mushrooms, magic mushrooms that made you hallucinate and see the gods, is the shamans, however that's supposed to be pronounced, as they interpreted their visions and dispensed them to their followers. Mushrooms have always been in a certain reverential pigeonhole in our culture, in our religion. Now, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but there are Native American religions who use peyote, which will do basically the same thing. Trust me. There are groups in South America that collect psychedelic fungus. Because nobody knew why, that first guy that ate that magic mushroom woke up the next morning telling his friends about where he went and what he saw and all that amazing stuff. Mushrooms have always had a hold on our psyche, our imagination, and our superstitions. Harmful mushrooms could be used by shamans, shay people, to do good or bad. A little tiny doses of poisonous substances can cure. Bigger doses obviously won't. Mushrooms featured in the art of the late 60s. It was a cultural thing at the time. It was a contemporary cultural time. There were mushroom images all around us. Timothy Leary with his acid. There were other people saying, no, you don't need that, eat mushrooms. It was a very strong cultural thing, but it's always had a hold on mankind's imagination, fears, superstitions. It's only in the last 40, 50, 60 years that we know exactly what it is that's in those that causes the trips. I think that's why, anyway. To my knowledge, nobody else at TSR had ever experimented. If they did, they didn't tell me about it. But hey, we were all adults in the mid 70s. So we'd had 10 years of acculturation to mushrooms as images. Mushrooms were popular tchotchkes, little knickknacks. My wife collected stuff with mushrooms on them. After we were married in 70. So, later on in the 70s, there were mushrooms on plates and mushroom plant holders and whatever. It was a design feature, but there's that deep subliminal thing about magic mushrooms that's in our reptile brain, I think. Do I have a module or adventure that is your favorite or recommended? Well, my favorites are all ones I wrote. Though the Village of Hamlet I really, really like because I was actively playtesting in that. And there may soon be a resin printed 3D figure of my head on a druid's body. My friend Jim Wampler is playing with. Of course, it's nothing we can sell or anything because it's copyrights and crap like that, but I can give them away. Anyway, I would say the G series for a number of reasons. If you want to know what the really old school was like, G1, G2, G3, the Giants. It was a rock'em, sock'em, slug it out with giants of all things. And it was possible. The levels that we designed it for could do it. I know that because we ran it as a huge tournament when it came out, and there were a bunch of groups made it to the final stage, the third round. So it can be done. Tough, oh yeah, but very old school. It was just, bare knuckles by your wits and the skin of your teeth. So those are the ones I'd recommend. My favorite, and it's going to be kickstarted in a few days on January 15th, last I heard. Every time I say this, it gets bumped back and I look dumber. Anyway, it's called Curse of the Weaver Queen, and there's a second one that goes with it. I'm not sure what the final title was. Mine was The Benison of the Weaver Queen. Anyway, it's one I did with Eldridge. I greatly expanded on it, made it into 2 adventures, linked them all together, sent you a whole different bunch of places to go adventure with teleporters and stuff. So that one's the one that's out right now. I'm working on a second one. I'm reskinning it so you can run it both old school fantasy and post-apocalyptic. It'll be, I don't know how I'm going to print it. Parallel lines of copy, I don't know. But we're going to do that. That's coming out. Okay, as you may recall, last week I read some weird stuff about planets and explained it. Well, anyway, so I got a response. You'd have to study Western tropical astrology to know that happy stellium in Capricorn, to know what happy stellium in Capricorn is. Well, no wonder. I don't believe I knew there was a subgenre of astrology, not being something that I follow heavily or at all. Stellium means 3 or more. I'm sharing this with you just because I brought it up, and perhaps you're just eating up with curiosity as what all that meant. Stellium means 3 or more significant solar system moons, planets, dwarf planets, and or stars in a 1/12th section of the zodiac. Now, the stellium is Sun, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, and their Greek names for those 3 planets are Zeus, Kronos, and Hades. Some say Hollywood dramatized this in the movie The Wrath of the Titans. Okay, now we know something about tropical astrology. Okay, there was a conversation about a portrait of me, somebody thought, named Sylvanus. No, I don't see any resemblance there whatsoever. Now, oddly enough, in this past week, if you go to my Facebook page, you'll find a portrait of me that Jim Wampler took in the process of doing the photogrammetry that's necessary to do the 360-degree stuff to get a sculpt. He published one that's, well, just go look at that. That's really funny. I liked a couple of them. I think the Socrates, the bust, the Greek bust of Socrates is a little bit of a stretch, but the Sean Connery reference in the monk for the Silence of the Rose was pretty funny. So yeah, I have no idea who did it, and it certainly doesn't look anything like me. Okay, here's an interesting mechanics question. 2-handed weapons always lose initiative. Was this made to make the fighting man's greater amount of hit points justifiable? Okay, back up a minute. Hit points is not muscle, meat, and bone. Hit points is skill at avoiding a fatal blow. I don't care if you want to pretend you got cut 6 times, but you didn't go to 0, all right? I've said this before. If hit points was muscle and bone, every time you healed, you become more scar-bound. You become scar-bound, and pretty soon you'd be completely ineffectual and end up cleaning out cesspits or sweeping out taverns late at night. 2-handed weapons are slower because of what's involved in wielding them in these microseconds. Now, there's a two-handed weapon it is legally a two-handed weapon that I wouldn't necessarily say it lost initiative. If it was a katana in the hands of someone trained and skilled, that forward thrust thing right through your gizzard, that could certainly catch you unaware. Certainly explain a high roll that he got on you right away with what is essentially a two-handed weapon. But the two-handed weapons that were used in well, let's face it, we mainly play Europe and Eurasian weapons and weapon types and that. They were more massive. They took a much bigger person to be able to swing them, which is why they were two-handed. Now, there's a sword that fell in the middle, the bastard or the hand and a half, whatever, when swung with two hands, could inflict hideous wounds. But if you were strong enough, you could do it with one and use your buckler or your shield to protect your other side. Two-handed weapons are slower simply because they're larger. They have more mass. Again, the katana is an exemplary of the exception to the rule. But they have more mass. They take longer to wield. They, unless they're in the hands of a very skilled wielder, and by very skilled, I'm talking at least 12th or 15th level before I would consider you very skilled. Very skilled. Because let's face it, we all get a whole bunch of points from gold and crap, easy crap we kill. Now, if you had all, yeah, anyway, remember, it's all just a vague idea of how we play this. It's just a representation. They're harder to hit. Fighting men had more hit points because it was assumed that they had some skill at avoiding that fatal blow. That's why we did it that way. Wizards were not skilled in avoiding a fatal blow. They didn't wear, by rules, they didn't wear metal. I allowed wizards to wear fancy leather, but never beyond a certain stage. Clerics were, restricted in much less. So they had more than wizards, but less than fighting men. It was all based on the innate ability to dodge a fatal strike. That's why arrows are such a huge leveler. Think of all the missile weapons that have changed battles. Harold Godwinson at Hastings. Richard Lionheart took a crossbow bolt to the neck and nearly killed him, and it ruined his campaign when he got so grievously injured and then sick. That's why I've always, if I ever favored anything, I was always pretty favorable to missile weapons. But it has to be the right circumstances too. Can't shoot a longbow, in an 8-foot tall corner. Let's see. Let's go somewhere else here. Anyway, that's what was behind the design. Okay, I touched on something, and it's worth elaborating the difference between random and arbitrary. Random is you have a wandering monster, and the DM says, okay, if you roll a 2, you run into one feral hog, and if I roll a 12, you encounter 8 feral hogs, and they're hungry. Better hope you surprise them. Arbitrary is okay. I agree. Life is arbitrary. No matter your best laid plans, shit happens. You get surprised by giant hogs. So now he goes the other direction. All right, you're surprised by giant hogs. They move first because they're forest creatures and they attack the magic user. That's arbitrary. Perhaps. You're right. DMs should allow randomness. And I'm at the very beginning, because I didn't know any other way to do it. I've always rolled, if the metaphor I use, if a rock falls out of the sky onto the party, I'll roll whatever is the appropriate die to see who it strikes. I've always played with that philosophy. Now, having said that, there are times when you can justify one of the party members becoming a particular target. Certain monster classes immediately go for the magic users. They sense that. They sense what they're carrying, etc. Mind flayers and brain eaters are going to go for the biggest, the smartest brain. And that's generally a magic user. I don't call that arbitrary if it's in keeping with the character and the normal behavior of the beast. That's just what it is. Just like if a boulet comes barreling out of the hill and one of you guys is a hobbit, he's going to lunge for the hobbit first because they like to eat him. That's the way I wrote them. They relish hobbits. So, of course, they're going to try and eat the hobbit. That's not arbitrary. That's instinctual. But no, just saying, okay, I'm going to take out the magic user. No, that's not fair. No. We have to maintain a balance of fairness, or what's the point? I don't know. You tell me. Arbitrariness, he concludes with arbitrariness just makes the players feel powerless. Absolutely. Absolutely. You can have bad luck. I've told many times about the Tales of Deathless Bob, the youngster that was in my very first campaign at college, who every time that rock fell out of the sky, no matter where he was in the lineup, that his number came up and he got killed. But he always came back and played for more because he knew it wasn't arbitrary. He knew it was random, and he was just a poor sucker in the group that always got nailed. Now, this is an interesting comment that I got, and this was on a older, this is about 10 or 12 back, about D&D is not all white anymore. Plenty of Asians play. Yes, I know, and I'm delighted to see that we're not so blindingly white anymore. Not surprisingly that we started out blindingly white when you consider who played games in the late 60s into the early to mid 70s. It was white guys, nerds. I only know one female. Now, I'm sure there may be others out there. I only know one female that if I brought up a board game of the bulge, okay, let's play. I'm not going anywhere beyond that. We were white guys, mostly almost always white guys, college guys, high school guys. Those are the guys that started this. It really went to the colleges because the colleges tended to have groups and were easier to form groups there. It was all white guys playing. It's not that we didn't want to. We didn't try. Now, there was a real boneheaded try by Gary, I believe, or with Gary's blessing, whoever wrote it. I'd have to go back and look, about women in role playing. But they imposed arbitrary limits that at the time we got away with, but within a few years, women were screaming about it because, after all, it's fantasy. So, I think it was probably in a late strategic review or somewhere in a dragon, somewhere probably in the first 15 issues, that this, women were capped at 15 or 16 strength, though they got bonuses for charisma. Terribly sexist stuff now, but not at all given the culture of the times. We were trying to encourage them They got dex bonuses, I believe. We were trying to encourage him to play and find non-standard roles, but we didn't do too well. And now I'm delighted. One of the neatest, most favorite guys I've met and becomes friends with on the game circuit as a designer and a publisher and et cetera, writer, is Mike Pondsmith, who's African American. And I was stunned when I met him 10, 11 years ago and realized that the name I'd seen, Mike Pondsmith, was a black man. And not because, well, you all know my family. We're all shades of brown and white. But I just didn't know of any successful ones. But now, yeah, there's many more. We're not nearly white anymore. We're trending toward brown or gray, really, the mixture of all the colors. Gray, maybe. I know it's supposed to be black, but we can't use that in this case. So anyway, yes, I'm delighted to see that there's a lot of Asians playing. Okay. This is also in response to a thread on Facebook, and I said I'd talk about it. Gentleman posted a thread on Facebook asking us old grognards how to go about running old school games at cons, and how to do it with if you know how to run them, but how to go about even getting. Okay, first thing, what's in your area? Subset, what's successful in your area? Subset, how far do you define your area? If you have a reasonably successful, having done it more than a couple of times, con of 900 people, go there and practice. That's the only way you get experience. I was hard when I came back out and started running games again in 2006, 2007. I just killed people willy-nilly right and left. Now, the adventures I was writing at the time, I was writing for a bunch of collector D&D nuts. And so they just, they loved glorious, bloody, hideous deaths. But Frank Menser taught me that, hey, when you're not running them for those kind of guys, and you're running for somebody that's probably paid money or allocated so many of his points or whatever to play in your game, let them play for a while, because I was killing them way too quick. So I put in something called the universal antidote, and however many there are in the party, there's half that number of antidotes, and that will fix any stupid mistake. Glues arm back on, puts body halves back together, whatever. It brings them back to half of their original hit points, and they get to keep playing. And since I've started running this new type of D&D game that I run, there's only been one party that didn't come back intact, because they actually needed more of them than they actually had. And the guy who didn't make it back had already used 2 of them. He was a great player, though. We were all having fun. And he had a couple of bad die rolls. Practice. Don't try immediately for the marquee cons, unless you live close to one of them. Marquee cons often have registration where you sit at the computer at midnight and wait to go on to start registering your games, because most of the marquee cons can only handle so many games based on their attendance, based on other considerations. Now, what do I call the marquee cons? Well, I'm not talking about Gen Con or Origins at all. I have no idea what their requirements are. Most of the local cons will waive your admission fees if you run X number of hours of games. for, you can't run just for 4 people at a time, unless you're going to run it 6 times. But, they generally require you to run, 20, 25 people minimum through your games to justify, comping you. Practice. Well, what are the name? Well, all right, Total Con, if you live in the area. They're so widely based. They play minis, they play boards, they play, I know we're talking RPGs. That's a possibility. However, Total Con is one of the ones that invites several of us old farts and bills us under old school, and we suck out a lot of the potential sign-ups. That's one of the reasons that you don't want to immediately shoot for a marquee con. Nexus in Milwaukee had some decent numbers a couple of years ago, the last time I looked. Gary Con certainly, because they're definitely a marquee type thing, and of course they specialize in old school, and they have so many old school people there that games could easily go unfilled. No players. I mean, it's happened to me. No players show up, or not enough to actually run what we're going to do. So it happens. North Texas RPG Con. If you live down in Texas, that's a good one to try, because it's 85 to 90% role playing, almost all old school, though there are some heroes and villains and vigilantes, and there are some of that genre, but those, I consider those pretty old school. And there's some Mutant Crawl classics and some dungeon crawl classics run down there, and there's a few board games, which really aren't board games anymore. I infected them with Circus Maximus. I ended up getting chariots. Doug had chariots made. We had big maps made. Somebody bought the game. They saw the gladiator thing on the other side, because that was a dual game from Yakinto, I think it was. And they play a really bizarre version of chariot racing now with armored horses and extra spears. So it's wonderful fun. And they also have a big gladiator contest. But those are the only boards that I'm aware of that they do there. There may be a couple others. There's some minis. But let's see, Game Hole in Madison in November. You might try that, but then again, it'll be tough until you develop a following or a name to get your games filled, unless you write a really amazing description in 60 or 80 words or less, whatever you're limited to. Do regional cons if you don't have a local one, something that's a couple hours drive away. Whatever you consider you're able to do after, if you don't want to get a room. I once drove to Gen Con, first Gen Con. I didn't know about having to get a hotel room in advance. I was stupid. Couldn't find one within 50 miles, so I had to drive home again that night. After all the gaming an entire day and meeting Gary and all of that, it was it's a long damn drive. I wish I didn't have to make. When you write your game descriptions, stress the fact that it's old school, first edition, or OD&D. I generally list mine as OD&D, because OD&D just got to where I liked it, and we made it in AD&D. So I play the last ultra chromed out OD&D, and get a feel for, you're going to run a 4-hour game. What are you going to do if you can't kill them all in 40 minutes, or if you do, something catastrophic happens. Set up several encounters that they don't have to run into all of them. If you favor a finale type thing, fine. If you set a goal, find the 3 keys, or whatever. Swell, it might be over quicker. but I don't think they'll feel cheated because they'll have a sense of accomplishment. Hey, we won that one, because you're not there to win. I used to think I was there to win, but Frank disabused me of that idea. In about a year and a half, 2 years, I was doing much better. But I earned my 89% TPK over about 3 years. Till he took me aside and said, "Hey, you're cheating them." So that's what I say. Try to go local, and if you do go local, go to your local hobby shop and put up a handmade thing saying, "Hey, I'm going to run such and such. I just wrote this for the con, and the people that know you from that store will be more likely to come and sign up for your game." Self-promotion. You need that to establish a reputation. Even, you start locally. You start at your friendly local. You start at your local con as running Dynamite Great Adventures. Decide whether or not you want to play true old school theater of the mind with just a rub-off board to help them. Okay, this is the way this weird shaped room looks like. But that's it. Decide if you're going to use minis. Are you going to provide the minis? I don't use minis. We didn't have them, so I learned how not to. But that's the best way I know. If you want to run your games, to find new recruits to your style of play, and when you do your self-promotion at your friendly local, challenge people that play other editions to come see how it all started. My best ideas. Okay, now I have a plea on behalf of a good friend of mine and a couple other people I know to game publishers. Is it possible that you could make some larger scaled playing aids for vision impaired? A very great friend of mine who I've gamed with for over, good Lord, 40 years now. Well, it's going on 40 years, is losing his eyesight. And it's tough for him, with the even, unless you're in perfect lighting, et cetera, et cetera. When we used to play when we play Ticket to Ride, I have blow-ups of the colors of the cars so that he can see the icons on them. And I just got a game that I'm not singling them out for abuse. This is what caused me to write him an email and suggest this. And so anybody else out there that's thinking about that, it's for Scoville. It came in the expansion kit, and it's a really smart little card that tells you how all the different peppers crossbreed. But it's tiny. Now, I understand why it's tiny, because it came in a small box. But by the same token, if you have the box, they could have put, you could put on the bottom of the rules, if you'd like a larger copy of the chart, because trying to blow this up unless you have a really good printer is going to be really tough, because the writing is so small. Put a code in the bottom of the rules. If you'd like a larger version of, such and such a table or chart, visit our website and enter this code. Easy peasy. I'd like to challenge all the game publishers to think about that. I don't care if you're Kickstarter or if you're an established company. We want to be more inclusive racially. We want to be more inclusive, bringing in more women. Well, let's not forget people with special needs, and when we can, when it's easy, come on, and I know that having the master on this card, you could easily print it at double size. Just, make the file at double size, and they can print them at home on their own computers. Just an idea. And I have one other thing. I have a birthday coming up on the 14th. And some people, and I've posted this on my Facebook page. Some people say, please give it to this shelter. Some people say, please give it to this charity. And then that's all well and good. And I'm not criticizing that at all. But I'm going to give you a better challenge if you want to do something to note my birthday. I want you to do something cool for a kid. Your kid, neighbor kid, stranger kid. Kid, define kid. Not an adult. 2 years old, 17 years old. And make a memory. Go to the zoo, the museum, the aquarium. Go on a hike. Rent a canoe and paddle down the river. Make memories, because we are the sum of our experiences and our memories. And then, when you do that, find my page on Facebook, find that thread, and tell me what you did. Because I think you'll find it'll make you feel really good too. I have my great-grands over almost every Sunday when they're not sick, hoping that someday when I'm gone, they'll remember the good times that they had at Grandma and Grandpa's house. Well, those memories could be the good time they had with Uncle Jim when he went hiking with them, or the good times they had with Dad when he took them out on the boat. Make a memory. Enrich someone's life. Pay for some kid's ice cream in line with you at the ice cream parlor. He'll remember that. Hey, that nice guy, he bought my ice cream. Hopefully he'll have manners and he'll thank you. If he doesn't, it doesn't matter. He'll still remember it, whether he's polite about it or not. And on that last little bit of preaching, I'll say, for the first time in 2020, do da da go vi. Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Last man around when them rates went down. Called it Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard brain. DSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Curmudgeon.